Russia launches nuclear missiles and killer drones, pushing the entire world into absolute panic and fear. Global tension has reached its highest point since the Cold War. Nuclear launches, drone attacks, and NATO movements create a scenario where any mistake could trigger a catastrophic war. The balance between deterrence and provocation is vanishing, and the world once again lives in fear of collapse. In recent weeks, Russia has accelerated nuclear missile launches and intensified attacks with high-powered drones on Ukrainian cities. NATO responded by boosting its military presence, while the United States reinforced sanctions and expanded support for Kyiv. The war has shifted from regional to global. Putin threatens NATO with active warheads, and leaders admit the war could now be unstoppable. Fronts are multiplying: attacks in Kyiv, sabotage in Belgorod, clashes in Pokrovsk, and diplomatic battles in Washington and Brussels. Amid missiles and promises of peace, new powers emerge, old alliances rebuild, and the shadow of World War looms again over Europe. From nuclear launches in the Arctic to high-powered warheads in Donetsk, the story is of a world that has lost control of its weapons and leaders. Every decision, retaliation, and threat adds to the risk of escalation no one seems willing to stop. The planet stands on the brink, and any decision now could ignite a full-scale world war. Could the distance between Trump and Putin finally end any chance of avoiding the Ukraine war turning into a global nuclear clash? Or is it better for everyone to find a bunker or safe place and wait for the official announcement that World War III has begun? Just a reminder, this report is based on news from Sky News, The New York Times, BBC, The Guardian, Al Jazeera, Sputnik, RT News, and Telegram. But before we get into the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription means a lot and helps you stay updated on every story about the raging nations. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up to help this project grow even more. The Kremlin confirmed the successful launch of the Burevestnik missile, a nuclear-powered weapon designed to stay airborne for days and strike intercontinental targets. Putin called the test a strategic breakthrough, reigniting global fears of an arms race with devastating nuclear consequences. Military experts warn that the Burevestnik, unlike any conventional missile, can bypass air defenses and carry massive destructive warheads. The launch marks a turning point in Russia's ambitions to project power beyond its borders, as nuclear deterrence returns to center stage. Hours after the test launch, European defense agencies reported concern over growing militarization in the Arctic. Satellites spotted Russian nuclear warheads moving near the North Pole, suggesting Moscow is preparing for a potential direct clash with NATO forces. US officials called the escalation the most dangerous since the Cold War ended. The White House strengthened air and sea surveillance, while analysts believe Putin is testing the West's willingness to respond. The Russian move is seen as an attempt to display technological and psychological superiority. The alarm echoed across the continent. Moscow declared the highest nuclear alert level after unveiling what it called the Flying Chernobyl. This unstable nuclear propulsion system could turn any malfunction into a global environmental disaster. But what comes next might be even more dangerous. Moscow declares maximum nuclear alert, and the Flying Chernobyl threatens to turn Europe into radioactive ash. European sources claim the experimental missile could reach any European capital in minutes. NATO raised its readiness level and began emergency interception drills, while regional leaders call for a unified response to Russia's growing threat. In Poland and Finland, troops were moved to defensive positions and new anti-air batteries were activated. NATO's command calls this the era of strategic realism, signaling Europe must accept nuclear risk as a permanent part of its military routine. In Brussels, Poland's Prime Minister declared that Europe lives the end of illusions. He said Russia's deterrent power has grown so much that any hesitation could cost lives across the continent. The speech sparked political alarms and solidified fear of a war with no escape routes. As tensions rise, Western diplomats try to reopen talks with Moscow, but the Kremlin insists its tests are legitimate and defensive. Putin called international reactions Western hysteria, stressing Russia is merely responding to NATO's military encirclement over recent decades. The atmosphere is urgent. With every new test and veiled threat, the world nears a nuclear breaking point. The fear is no longer hypothetical. Russia's arsenal is ready, the West reacts, and the next move could redefine global security. And in this very setting, the invisible war begins to take shape. Russia's arsenal is ready, the West responds, and the world nears an unprecedented nuclear disaster. The war has entered a silent phase where drones replace soldiers and battles move among the clouds. The Sea Baby, a Ukrainian model operating below radar level, has already destroyed several Russian ships in the Black Sea, forcing Moscow to completely rethink its naval strategy. Built with hybrid technology, the Sea Baby can carry high-precision explosives and operate remotely over long distances. The psychological impact of these weapons is immense. Russia's once dominant fleet now finds itself hunted by nearly invisible machines that appear and vanish without a trace. In Ukraine's underground bunkers, engineers and soldiers coordinate drone strikes from fortified bases. The cat-and-mouse war has become routine. While Russia tries to intercept drones with S-400 systems, Kyiv relies on new flight routes and electronic interference technology to confuse radars. Civilians are paying dearly for this invisible war. A Russian drone hit a minibus in Sumy, killing 1 and injuring 13. Hours later, another strike in Kyiv left 3 dead and dozens wounded. The destruction shows that even without ground troops, aerial terror is constant. The number of attacks keeps rising. In September alone, Russia launched over 5,000 suicide drones against Ukrainian cities. What comes next, with more civilian and industrial targets, could make the conflict even darker, with unpredictable consequences. Drones cross borders, destroying cities, turning war into pure extermination without mercy or restraint. Ukraine fights back in kind. Military sources reveal Kyiv carried out over 1,200 airstrikes in just 1 week, combining drones and medium-range missiles. The new strategy aims to exhaust the enemy on multiple fronts, preventing Moscow from maintaining logistical control of the conflict. Russian forces now rely on electronic jammers, but heavy use of these systems disrupts their own communications. The technological war has become chaotic, with both sides struggling to control their equipment amid a battlefield saturated with waves and crossed signals. Analysts say the pace of attacks is straining drone supplies on both sides. Ukraine seeks international help to produce more units, while Russia depends on foreign components to sustain its offensive capacity. The battlefield has also become an industrial competition. Meanwhile, Ukrainian cities live under constant watch. Air alarms sound several times a day, and underground shelters have become the safest refuge. The population has learned to recognize the sound of enemy drones even before the sirens, a cruel reflection of familiarity with danger. The drone war has completely redefined the concept of borders and reaction time. There are no fixed battle lines or stable defenses anymore. The enemy can appear in seconds and vanish just as quickly. And the next section will show how these attacks reshape the ground war map. Explosions tear through Kyiv and Donetsk, and ground war becomes a massacre with no survivors. Dawn in Kyiv was marked by a new wave of attacks. Russian drones hit residential areas and critical infrastructure, killing 3 people and injuring 29. The Ukrainian government confirmed the goal was to cripple the capital as rescue teams rushed through debris and fires. In central Ukraine, an attack destroyed the country's second-largest medicine distributor. The impact hit hospitals and clinics directly, leaving entire regions without basic supplies. Local authorities denounced the act as an international crime and vowed proportional retaliation against Russian military targets. In response, Ukrainian units launched medium-range missiles against Russian positions in Donetsk. The counterattack caused explosions in fuel depots and supply lines, creating major logistical losses. Kyiv's command stated that every civilian attack will be answered with surgical precision. At the Russian border, a dam near Belgorod partially collapsed after being hit. The breach isolated Russian units in the Kharkiv region, cutting off supply and evacuation routes. Moscow accused Ukraine of sabotage, but the Ukrainian government neither confirmed nor denied the operation. The dam's destruction deepened the chaos in the conflict zone, disrupting communications and troop mobility. While engineers try to repair the structure, military groups prepare for a new ground offensive, and at this point, the battle for strategic cities begins to intensify. Pokrovsk lies in ruins, Russian tanks advancing over corpses while civilians are wiped out in the streets. Pokrovsk has become the epicenter of the war. Russian troops penetrated heavily contested areas, fighting house to house against Ukrainian forces. The local government ordered an immediate evacuation, but many civilians refused to leave their homes, fearing looting and losing everything they own. International media highlighted scenes of destruction in Pokrovsk, with buildings in ruins and smoke columns visible for miles. Sources say Russia deployed heavy artillery and kamikaze drones to secure its advance, while Ukraine positioned new anti-tank defenses to hold off the assault. Despite the losses, Kyiv claims to have regained small areas in Donetsk. Fighting remains intense, and every meter of land comes at a high human cost. Observers report the war has entered a phase of attrition where neither side can secure significant victories. The destruction of entire cities and the collapse of supply routes have turned the landscape into a graveyard of tanks and charred buildings. Russian attacks have become more random, aimed at demoralizing Ukraine, yet the country insists on resisting, supported by its NATO allies. Even with Russia's advance, Ukraine tries to exploit every opening to launch rapid offensives. The war moves in unpredictable cycles, and upcoming events could completely change the conflict's dynamics, especially now that diplomacy is back in the spotlight. The focus of the war has shifted from trenches to negotiation tables. Dmitriev, the Kremlin's envoy, held discreet meetings with American businessman Steve Witkoff amid talks about sanctions and possible economic deals. The gesture signals Moscow is seeking ways to ease financial pressure. Diplomats talk, but sanctions, betrayals, and espionage have turned this into a political world war. On the other side, Zelensky's advisors are trying to use these talks to their advantage. One of the president's top aides invited Witkoff to visit Kyiv, interpreting Russia's approach as a sign of weakness. The goal is to show Ukraine still has the ability to engage diplomatically, even under constant attack. Diplomatic tensions escalated when the U.S. Treasury Department responded to Dmitriev's comments about sanctions. Labeled a Kremlin propagandist, he was accused of trying to manipulate U.S. public opinion and persuade business leaders to support parallel deals with Moscow. Pressure on Russia's economy is mounting. The U.S. government estimates Russian oil revenues will drop by 20 to 30% by year's end. Experts say reduced energy exports are already straining the military budget and limiting Moscow's ability to sustain long-term operations. Hungary once again defies European consensus. The Hungarian government rejected new measures against Moscow and called for NATO restraint. This stance divided allies and caused tension in Brussels, just as upcoming diplomatic decisions could define the course of the conflict and sanctions. NATO authorizes shooting down Russian jets, and one mistake could ignite the start of World War III. Relations between Moscow and Washington have turned into a game of threats and cautious engagement. While Putin claims sanctions don't harm Russia's economy, officials admit growing trouble importing key components, especially electronics and semiconductors used in missiles and drones. Behind the scenes, European sources reveal intermediaries are being used to bypass trade restrictions. Shell companies in neutral countries transfer military technology and fuel to Russia. This black market is now under joint investigation by the US and the European Union. Diplomacy has become a parallel battlefield, with every public move carefully calculated. While Russia tries to show strength and self-reliance, Ukraine focuses on portraying resilience and Western backing. Neither side, however, shows any real willingness to yield. The battle of narratives has also reached global public opinion. Online campaigns, selective reporting, and strategic leaks shape perceptions of who's the aggressor and who's the victim. This clash of versions fuels misinformation and confuses even close allies, making the war increasingly unpredictable. The diplomatic battle is far from over. As sanctions, secret deals, and economic pressures intensify, NATO forces are expanding their presence along Eastern Europe's borders, a move that could turn political tension into a direct confrontation of immeasurable proportions. Trump vows to destroy Russia, and Putin prepares a new front across all of Europe. Estonia warned that Russia is testing NATO's resolve, taking advantage of political uncertainty caused by Trump's return to the US presidency. For Baltic leaders, Moscow is gauging how far it can go without triggering an immediate military response from the alliance. In response, NATO deployed fighter jets and increased patrols in Eastern Europe after one of the largest Russian attacks since the war began. The alliance's command declared heightened readiness, as experts warn that any miscalculation could spark an uncontrollable escalation. Western air forces are now authorized to shoot down Russian aircraft violating NATO airspace. The new protocol was described as defensive and proportional, but analysts admit that downing a Russian jet could easily ignite an open war between nuclear powers. The situation worsened when Russian jets briefly crossed Lithuania's border, violating Allied airspace. The incident alarmed Brussels and prompted an immediate response from Joint Command. Putin replied defiantly, declaring that no border will stop Moscow's power. In London, Poland's Prime Minister warned of a potential Russian attack planned on British soil, citing intelligence on battlefield reconnaissance carried out by Moscow in several European capitals. The climate of fear is growing, and what's coming may shatter the final barrier of diplomatic restraint. Nuclear escalation, cyber attacks, and unstable alliances are dragging humanity toward its final collapse. The prolonged war has turned into a race for political and military survival. Former US Ambassador William Taylor stated that Ukraine's full NATO membership is the only true guarantee of security, a move that would raise the conflict to a new level of global risk. Zelensky admitted the war could drag on for another 2 or 3 years, even after significant losses. He said the country is prepared to resist, but the human cost will be unsustainable without continuous Western support. His tone reflected a government exhausted by devastation. The Ukrainian president stressed that creativity and adaptation alone are no longer enough to counter Russia's military machine. The growing gap in weapons and ammunition widens the divide between both sides. Still, Zelensky insists the determination of the Ukrainian people remains his strongest weapon. As Ukraine fights to survive, Trump declared he wants to end Russia and finish the war after the Gaza ceasefire. The statement caused intense reactions, with Moscow calling it a dangerous provocation and NATO allies trying to contain its political impact. Behind the scenes, reports suggest Russia may open a new battlefront in Europe, expanding the conflict beyond Ukraine's borders. Experts point to the use of KB bombs, launched by rockets and designed to mimic cruise missiles. What happens next could completely redefine global military balance. Russia launches nuclear missiles and killer drones, pushing the entire world into absolute panic and fear. The military and diplomatic escalation between Russia, Ukraine, NATO, and the United States makes it clear the war has already crossed its original borders. What began as a regional conflict now threatens to reshape global power and push the world into a new age of uncertainty. The rise of nuclear weapons, cyber attacks, and expanding battlefronts shows that geopolitical balance is collapsing. As major powers test their limits, smaller nations are being dragged into a conflict they neither control nor fully understand. World leaders keep delivering peace speeches, but every meeting, sanction, and military operation proves the opposite. Diplomacy has become hostage to weapons, and trust between blocs has nearly vanished. The fear of nuclear use is once again a real threat to humanity. Experts warn that if Russia opens a new front in Europe, the conflict will reach a level unseen since 1945. The combination of nuclear provocation, autonomous drones, and unstable alliances could turn the continent into a permanent war zone. The planet stands on the brink, and any decision now could ignite a full-scale world war. Has the distance between Trump and Putin finally ended any chance of avoiding a global nuclear showdown? Or do you think it's time for everyone to find a bunker or safe place and wait for the official announcement that World War III has begun? Thanks so much for sticking around until the end of the video. You're awesome, and I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any updates on the raging nations. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up to help this project grow even more.